Well, let's get more analysis on this from investment advisor Patrick Young. He joins me live now from Brussels. Well, Patrick, you are an investor, so what does this do to the trust of people like you in America now?
Well, unfortunately, Bill, this is just another example of how difficult it is to trust the American government machine. And machine it is, because truly the thing that's being shut down at the moment is a massive leviathan, even compared to what it was in 1995. But ultimately, what do we want to see as investors? Well, we like to see leadership, and that's one of the problems we have at the moment. In 1995, the shutdown there was quite different. Bill Clinton, as president, did seem to be in charge of the country. Unfortunately, Mr. Obama seems to be occupying the White House, but he doesn't give us any confidence that he's actually leading the United States of America. Ultimately, right now, investors aren't taking any further knee-jerk action. But of course, what we're warming up to is going to be another couple of weeks' time, somewhere between, I think, the 17th and the 20th of October, when actually the American government is going to reach the point where it has to go and borrow more money. And the problem with that is it's been drinking vodka like an alcoholic for 40 or 50 years, and the bar tab needs to be paid. But in the meantime, they're hoping to get some more credit.
And do you think then the US could actually suffer a default if this crisis continues?
Oh, absolutely. There's no reason why it can't end up with a default. I mean, what we've got is we've got a president in Mr. Obama who's effectively happier to go off and negotiate and have a quick conversation on the telephone with the president of Iran than he is to talk to those who are, after all, democratically elected representatives in Congress. Ultimately, there is a problem. That's not to say that those in Congress aren't being remarkably stubborn at the same time. But then again, one has to say, everyone has been driven to extremes. We know that at the last time we reached this sort of hiatus, America lost its wonderful, glittering, top-tier AAA credit rating. Why did it lose that? It lost that because A, Mr. Obama does not seem to be in charge of the country, and B, he's certainly not stewarding the finances in any way that's remotely coherent going forward. Ultimately, the American nation, the government, needs to go on a diet. At that point in time, investors will be happier, and of course, there will be much less risk of a default.
But Patrick, there's a lot of overreaction here, isn't there? This crisis may not last for very long, and of course, the US economy is showing signs of recovery. So it's not looking that bad for the future, is it?
Oh gosh, no. It's very important to understand where we are in this perspective. And that is, of course, that in the little bubble, which is Washington, D.C. and the Capitol, politicians love to try and make a drama out of anything that they possibly can. We're seeing this incredibly amazing entrenched standoff. And you know what's really happening is actually, ultimately, while obviously there are problems for those million people who aren't getting paid at the moment, and indeed the 800,000 who ultimately have been furloughed for the time being, actually, what people may end up seeing is that really the long arm of government doesn't do that much for them. Private enterprise can still manage to carry on, and let's face it, private enterprise has been the engine of growth in the United States economy. The economy is returning to growth. There are opportunities in the world economy, but at the same time, we don't like to see, particularly as investors, the idea that the government is willing to play with fire. And that's what we have here. Ultimately, a dispute between what looks like, frankly, a few needy teenagers, but instead they're the government of the United States of America bickering over something in their backyard, of which we really shouldn't need to have an argument whatsoever.
And just briefly, Patrick, as an investor, what are your thoughts on the dollar then? Some are saying this should lead to a call for more alternative reserve currencies to be investigated. Is that really true, to challenge the dollar over this crisis?
We have reached a point where we are at the Copernican revolution in finance. Things like Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and other alternatives, possibly something like, say, the Chinese renminbi or the Indian rupiah or anything, is going to become a much more important reserve currency going forward. The US dollar has had an incredible vaunted position as the economic and indeed the military superpower of this age. Ultimately, over time, that is bound to erode, and therefore we are going to see more alternatives. People want to hold assets that they can ultimately trust, and to that end, it may rather be a case of in Bitcoin we trust in the future rather than the US dollar.
And Patrick, just briefly, again, the impact on the European economy at the moment. There you are in the heart of Europe. Are there alarm bells sounding there? You talked about the global implications earlier, but what about for Europe itself?
Well, I think truly the implications for the European economy right now aren't particularly considerable. They've got such an absolutely scintillating mess of their own creation here through incredible government spending, massive unemployment, all sorts of other crises, that ultimately a little blip in the US budgetary discussions, it tends to be a degree of, well, early pantomime for Christmas. But is it ultimately going to derail the European economy? Oh, goodness, no. Brussels has already done that all by itself.
Patrick Young, great to talk to you. Great to hear your thoughts as always. Investment advisor Patrick Young live in Brussels. Thank you very much. Good to see you here on RT.